The Pure Finders, the most disgusting job in Victorian London. In the mid-19th century, if you walked through the cobblestone alleys of London, you'd be met with a sensory assault that no history book can truly capture. The city was the heart of a global empire, but beneath the veneer of industrial triumph lay a landscape of literal filth. Amidst the swirling fog and the stench of the Thames, you might spot a shadowy figure stooped over the gutter, clutching a bucket and a small wooden paddle. To a passerby, they were a ghost of the slums. To the industrial economy, they were a vital cog. This was a pure finder, and they held what was arguably the most stomach-turning job in human history. While others were bone grinders or mudlarks scavenging for scrap metal in the river, the pure finders were after something far more specific and far more biological. They spent their lives hunting for pure, the Victorian euphemism for dog feces.
It sounds like a cruel joke, but in the 1850s, this wasn't just a job. It was a high-stakes trade that fueled one of Britain's wealthiest industries, the economy of the gutter. To understand why anyone would voluntarily spend 12 hours a day collecting waste, you have to understand the sheer scale of the Victorian leather industry. London was obsessed with high-fashioned gloves, book covers, and delicate shoes. The tanning process required a substance that could soften the hides and remove the harsh lime used to strip away hair. Through a quirk of organic chemistry, the alkaline properties found in dog waste were the most effective softeners available to 19th century tanners. The tanneries of Bermondsey were hungry for this pure. Because there was no synthetic alternative, the demand created a lucrative, albeit revolting, market.
A pure finder could sell a bucket of their finds for a few pence, enough to buy a loaf of the notorious bone bread or a night in a two-penny rope lodging house. In a city where 25% of the population lived in extreme poverty, the gutter wasn't just a sewer, it was a gold mine for the desperate. A day in the life of a pure finder. A pure finder's day began before the sun pierced through the coal smoke. They were often elderly women or men too broken by manual labor for the docks, dressed in rags that had absorbed the smells of the city for years. They carried a blacking bottle or a small pail and searched the streets where the wealthy kept their pets.
There was a hierarchy to the waste. Dry was easy to handle, but less valuable. The wet or fresh was what the tanneries truly wanted, as the chemical properties were more potent. They didn't use gloves. In an era where even doctors thought washing hands was a waste of time, a pure finder worked with their bare skin, often using a small piece of wood to scrape the findings into their bucket. The competition was fierce. Henry Mayhew, the legendary Victorian chronicler, noted that there were roughly 200 to 300 pure finders stalking the streets of London at any given time. If you weren't fast, another scavenger would claim the pure before you. They were the invisible street cleaners of the empire, removing the biological hazards of the city, not for public health, but for industrial profit. The tanning process, a chemical nightmare. Once the bucket was full, the pure finder would head to the tanneries.
Here, the pure was mixed with water and large wooden vats to create a pungent alkaline soup. Workers known as beamsmen would soak the animal hides in this mixture. The science behind it was gruesome but effective. The bacteria in the waste acted as an enzyme, breaking down the fibers of the skin to make it supple enough for a lady's glove. The smell of these factories was so powerful it was said to peel the paint off nearby houses. Residents of Bermondsey lived in a permanent cloud of organic decay. For the pure finder, the transaction was simple. They traded their dignity and health for a few coppers. They were the primary suppliers to an industry that clothed the upper classes in the finest leathers. Yet those same upper classes would cross the street to avoid the stench of the poor. It was a cycle of consumption where the highest levels of luxury were literally prepared using the lowest forms of waste. The biological risk, life on the edge.
Working as a purifier wasn't just disgusting, it was a slow-acting death sentence. While the Victorian medical establishment was still arguing over whether miasma, bad air, caused disease, the purifinders were living in a constant state of bacterial exposure.
They were the first to catch the frequent outbreaks of cholera and typhoid that ravaged the London slums. Their hands were often covered in small cuts and sores from handling the rough cobblestones and industrial waste, providing an open door for infection. Yet, remarkably, some survived into their 70s, their immune systems hardened by a lifetime in the trenches of the city's waste. The tragedy of the Purefinder is that they were essential, but erased. History remembers the Victorian engineers who built the sewers, but it forgets the thousands of people who manually kept the streets clear of biological waste so the leather trade could flourish. They were a human filter for a city that was growing too fast to manage its own filth. The end of the trade. The Purefinders didn't disappear because the city got cleaner. They disappeared because of the laboratory. By the end of the 19th century, chemists developed synthetic baits, artificial versions of the enzymes found in pure.
These were cheaper, more consistent, and infinitely less offensive to the nose. Almost overnight, the market for pure collapsed. The tanneries stopped buying, and the Purefinders were pushed even further into the margins of society. Many ended their lives in the dreaded workhouses, their buckets and paddles discarded in the very gutters they had once spent their lives patrolling. A haunting legacy. The story of the Purefinder is the ultimate reality check for those who romanticize the Victorian Golden Age. Behind every pair of soft leather gloves worn in a London ballroom was a person who had spent their mornings scraping the pavement with their bare hands.
It reminds us that the Industrial Revolution wasn't just fueled by cold and steam, it was fueled by human desperation. The Purefinders were a testament to the lengths a human being will go to survive when society offers no other choice. They turned the most repulsive substance on Earth into a lifeline. As you look back at the grand architecture of 1850s London, remember the shadows in the alleys. Remember the smell of the Bermondsey tanneries and the stooped figures with their buckets. They were the Purefinders, the people who touched the filth so the empire could feel clean. They were the most disgusting job in London, and perhaps the most honest reflection of what it truly meant to be poor in the greatest city on Earth. Every leather-bound book in a Victorian library and every polished boot on a gentleman's foot is a silent monument to the Purefinder.
They were the invisible laborers of the gutter, a reminder that progress is often built on a foundation of things we would rather forget. In the end, they were more than just scavengers. They were a biological necessity in a world that wasn't ready to face its own waste. The Victorian era was a time of two worlds, one of silk and sugar, and one of pure and bone. The bridge between them was the Purefinder, standing in the muck, paddle in hand, ensuring that the luxury of the few was made possible by the labor of the forgotten. It is a job that history has tried to erase, but the stench of it, the raw, visceral reality of it, remains a permanent stain on the story of the 19th century.